The conference hall in Austin, Texas, was packed to capacity that afternoon in March 2024. Over 3,000 people had gathered for the Global Innovation Summit, an annual event that brought together entrepreneurs, investors, tech leaders, and public figures to discuss the future of business, technology, and society. The stage was enormous, modern, minimalistic, with massive LED screens displaying the summit logo and live social media feeds from attendees. The air was thick with anticipation, not because of the scheduled panel discussion on entrepreneurship and risk, but because of who was on that panel. Elon Musk, 52 years old, CEO of Tesla, SpaceX, owner of X, formerly Twitter, the richest man on the planet with a net worth exceeding $200 billion, a man who had become synonymous with innovation, disruption, and controversy. And sitting just a few feet away from him, Conor McGregor, 35, former two-division UFC champion, founder of multiple businesses including Proper 12 Whiskey, Forge Irish Stout, and McGregor Fast Fitness Centers. A man who had built an empire not from inherited wealth or venture capital, but from his fists, his mouth, and his relentless belief in himself. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Musk wore his usual outfit, a black t-shirt, dark jeans, slightly disheveled hair, the uniform of the tech billionaire who wanted you to know he was too busy changing the world to care about appearances. McGregor wore a perfectly tailored three-piece charcoal suit, burgundy pocket square, hair immaculately styled, sitting with the posture of someone who had learned long ago that presentation matters, that how you carry yourself is part of the message. The moderator, a well-known business journalist named Sarah Chen, sat between them, aware that this panel had the potential to become one of the most talked-about moments of the entire summit. The topic was supposed to be about risk-taking in entrepreneurship, about what separates those who succeed from those who fail, but everyone in that room knew what was really happening. This was a collision of two worlds, old money versus new money, tech elite versus self-made fighter, inherited advantage versus earned respect, and it was about to get very real. The first 20 minutes were predictable. Chen asked questions about failure, about innovation, about dealing with criticism. Musk spoke at length, as he always did, about his vision for Mars colonization, about the importance of sustainable energy, about how the traditional business world didn't understand what he was trying to build. He spoke with the confidence of someone who had never been told no, or if he had simply ignored it until reality bent to his will. McGregor listened, arms crossed, occasionally nodding, but mostly silent. He had been invited to this panel as a representative of athlete entrepreneurship, of celebrity business ventures, of the growing trend of public figures building empires outside their original fields. But he knew why he was really there. He was there to be contrasted with Musk. He was there to represent the category of people who get dismissed as lucky, as branding exercises, as not real entrepreneurs. And he knew that at some point someone was going to say it out loud. He just didn't know when. The moment came 32 minutes into the panel. Sarah Chen had just asked a question about what makes a true entrepreneur, about what qualities are essential for building something that lasts. Musk leaned back in his chair, glanced briefly at McGregor, and began to speak. His tone was casual, almost friendly, but there was an edge to it, the kind of edge that comes from someone who believes they're intellectually superior to everyone else in the room. "You know," he said, "I think there's a real difference between building a company and building a brand. And I mean no disrespect to Conor, truly, but when you look at what we do at Tesla, at SpaceX, we're solving engineering problems that have never been solved before. We're pushing the boundaries of physics, of manufacturing, of logistics. That requires a level of technical knowledge, of systems thinking, of long-term strategic planning that, frankly, most people just don't have." The implication was clear. McGregor was most people. The audience shifted uncomfortably, a few nervous laughs. McGregor's expression didn't change. He just kept looking at Musk, waiting. Musk continued, warming to his theme. I respect athletes, obviously. What they do physically is incredible. But business, real business, is about solving complex problems at scale. It's about understanding technology, understanding markets, understanding how to build systems that can operate independently of you. It's not about selling your name or your image. That's marketing. That's not entrepreneurship. He paused, then added with a slight smile. I mean, if putting your face on a bottle of whiskey makes you an entrepreneur, then every celebrity with a fragrance line is the next Steve Jobs, right? More laughter from the audience, louder this time. Sarah Chen looked uncomfortable, glancing between the two men. McGregor still hadn't moved, still hadn't reacted. His face was completely neutral, but anyone who knew him, who had watched him in press conferences, in weigh-ins, in the moments before a fight, recognized that look. It was the look of a man who had just been given exactly what he needed. Musk had made a mistake. He had assumed that because McGregor came from fighting, he was just muscle. He had assumed that because McGregor's businesses were consumer brands, they were simple. He had assumed that because McGregor didn't have an engineering degree from an Ivy League university, he didn't understand how to build something real. And now, in front of 3,000 people and a live stream being watched by hundreds of thousands more, McGregor was going to teach him a lesson about assumptions. Sarah Chen tried to move on to the next question, but McGregor raised his hand slightly, a small gesture, but everyone noticed. He leaned forward, placed both hands flat on the table in front of him, and looked directly at Elon Musk. His voice was calm, measured, with that unmistakable Irish accent that somehow made everything he said sound more intense. Elon, he said, I appreciate the lecture, really. I'm sure it's the same one you give to everyone who didn't inherit an emerald mine or get $100,000 checks from their parents to start their first company. The room went completely silent. You could feel the air pressure change. Musk's smile disappeared instantly. His jaw tightened. A few people in the audience gasped. Sarah Chen's eyes went wide. McGregor wasn't done. He kept his eyes locked on Musk, his voice still calm, still controlled, but now with an edge that cut through the room like a blade. You talk about solving complex problems, he continued. Let me tell you about a complex problem. Growing up with nothing, absolutely nothing. My parents working multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. No connections, no investors, no family money to fall back on. That's a complex problem. And the solution isn't something you learn at Stanford. The solution is you wake up every single day and you work harder than everyone around you because you know that if you don't, you'll end up right back where you started.
The audience was transfixed. Some were nodding, others looked shocked. Musk sat frozen, clearly not expecting this level of response. McGregor leaned back slightly, but his intensity didn't decrease. You say I just put my face on a bottle of whiskey, he said. Let me educate you on what that actually means. When I launched Proper 12, I didn't just sign a licensing deal and walk away. I was in every single meeting. I chose the distillery. I tasted every batch until we got it right. I designed the bottle, the label, the marketing strategy. I negotiated distribution deals in 40 different countries. I personally called retailers, distributors, bar owners. I flew to Ireland, to the United States, to Australia, building relationships, learning the industry from the ground up. And within 2 years, we became one of the fastest growing whiskey brands in the world. Not because of my name, because of the product, the strategy, and the execution. He paused, letting that sink in. Then came the sentence that would define the entire exchange. You built companies with other people's money, Elon. I built mine with my own blood. There's a difference. The room erupted, not in applause, not in boos, but in a kind of collective shock. Cameras flashed, phones were raised to record. The live stream chat exploded with comments. Sarah Chen tried to regain control, but it was impossible. The moment had already happened. Musk's face had gone through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, anger, defensiveness, and then, strangely, something that almost looked like respect. He opened his mouth to respond, closed it, then tried again. His voice, usually so confident, now sounded slightly strained. Look, everyone's path is different, obviously. I'm not saying that what you did isn't impressive, but we're talking about different scales here, different levels of complexity. SpaceX literally sends rockets to space. Tesla is revolutionizing transportation. We're not comparable. McGregor smiled, not a friendly smile, but the smile of someone who had just proven a point. You're right, Elon, we're not comparable, because I didn't need billions in government subsidies to build my businesses. I didn't need taxpayer money to bail me out when things got tough. I risked my own money, my own reputation, my own future. And when I succeeded, I didn't ask for credit, I just collected the check. The audience gasped again. This was no longer a panel discussion, this was a public dismantling. Musk tried to respond, but his usual eloquence had abandoned him. Government contracts aren't subsidies, we're providing a service that... McGregor cut him off, his voice still calm, but now with an undeniable authority. Elon, I have respect for what you've built, I do, but don't sit up here and tell people like me that we're not real entrepreneurs because we didn't go to the right schools or work in the right industries. Some of us built empires from nothing, and we did it without safety nets, without bailouts, without daddy's money. So before you dismiss what I do as just marketing, maybe ask yourself how many people from my background have done what I've done. And then ask yourself how many people from your background have failed with all the advantages you had. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah Chen didn't even try to continue. She just sat there, looking between the two men, clearly aware that this moment would be replayed millions of times across every social media platform on Earth. Musk stared at McGregor for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he nodded. "Fair enough," he said quietly. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or sit in stunned silence. Most chose silence. The panel continued for another 15 minutes, but it was purely ceremonial. Everyone knew the conversation was over. The clip was made. The moment was captured. When it ended, both men stood, shook hands briefly, and walked off stage in opposite directions. According to multiple people who were backstage afterward, Musk left immediately, declining all interview requests. McGregor stayed, took photos with attendees, answered questions from journalists, and never once mentioned the exchange unless directly asked. When he was asked, he simply said, "I said what needed to be said. Nothing more, nothing less." Within 2 hours, the clip had been viewed over 20 million times. By the end of the day, it had reached 60 million. News outlets across the world covered it. Business channels, sports networks, tech blogs, political commentators, everyone had an opinion. Some praised McGregor for standing up to Musk's arrogance. Others accused him of being disrespectful to one of the greatest entrepreneurs of our time. But the most common response, the one that echoed across social media in dozens of languages, was simply this: he's right. Because McGregor had articulated something that millions of people felt but rarely heard expressed so clearly. The game is rigged. Not completely, not in every case, but enough that pretending it isn't is an insult to everyone who has had to fight for every inch of progress they've made. Elon Musk is brilliant, no one disputes that. His companies have achieved things that seemed impossible, but he started with advantages that most people will never have: financial security, access to elite education, connections to investors, a safety net that allowed him to take risks without risking everything.
That doesn't diminish his achievements, but it does put them in context, and McGregor, in that moment, forced everyone to acknowledge that context. The response from the business world was fascinating. Some venture capitalists and tech executives defended Musk, arguing that his contributions to sustainable energy and space exploration were more important than McGregor's consumer brands. But others, particularly those from working-class backgrounds or who had built businesses without significant outside capital, spoke up in support of McGregor. One prominent investor tweeted, "I've funded over 50 startups. The ones that succeed aren't always the ones with the best ideas or the most credentials. They're the ones with the most hunger." McGregor understands that in a way most people in Silicon Valley never will. That sentiment was echoed by entrepreneurs across industries. The narrative began to shift. Suddenly, conversations about privilege, about access, about what entrepreneurship really means were happening in boardrooms, in business schools, in investment meetings. McGregor hadn't just defended himself, he had started a conversation that the business world had been avoiding for decades.
For McGregor, the moment was validation of something he had always believed, that intelligence isn't just technical knowledge, that entrepreneurship isn't just about raising capital, that respect has to be earned, not assumed based on wealth or connections. In the weeks following the summit, he didn't gloat, didn't do a victory lap, didn't even mention it again publicly. He just went back to work, building his businesses, training fighters at his gym, investing in new ventures. Because for him, the work had always been the point. The recognition was nice, but it was never the goal. But for millions of others, the moment meant something more. It was proof that you don't have to accept someone else's definition of success, that you don't have to be silent when someone with more money or more power tries to diminish what you've built. That sometimes the most radical thing you can do is simply tell the truth, clearly, confidently, without apology. And that truth, delivered at the right moment, can change not just one conversation, but an entire narrative. Elon Musk never publicly responded to the exchange beyond that initial moment on stage. His companies continued to make headlines, his Twitter account continued to spark controversies, his ambitions continued to reach towards Mars. But for those who were there or who watched the clip, something had shifted. The illusion of the self-made billionaire, already fragile, had been shattered just a little bit more. Not because Musk isn't talented, he obviously is, but because McGregor had reminded everyone that talent without context is just another story we tell ourselves to justify inequality. And the story that the world is a meritocracy, that anyone can succeed if they just work hard enough, becomes a lot harder to sell when you're sitting next to someone who actually did it the hard way and who isn't afraid to point out the difference. That moment in Austin wasn't just a viral clip, it was a reckoning. A reminder that the loudest voices aren't always the most legitimate, that wealth doesn't equal wisdom, and that sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who ends up teaching everyone else the most important lesson of all. Know who you're talking to before you assume you're better than them, because you might just find out that the man you dismissed as just a fighter is actually the only real entrepreneur in the room.